think the deal is that Piotr will be doing most of the talking, and then I'll be trying to answer your questions in the chat or collecting them for later. And I will be back towards the end of the presentation on the screen, and then we can talk about things. Does that sound like a deal, Piotr?
Yes, that's exactly the plan for today. К сожалению, мы не говорим по-украински, я чуть-чуть говорю по-русски, но Рустам говорит по-русски очень хорошо. It means if you have any questions both in English, both in Russian, please don't hesitate to put them in chat. I know Rustam does a very great job when it comes to translating your questions, so please don't hesitate pasting them either in English or in Russian. Okay, so this is the talk for today, the topic, Java records for the intrigued. And briefly about myself, so my name is Piotr Przybyl, and it sounds in Polish. I was told in Ukrainian that would be Piotr Przybyl. So if that's easier for you, no problem at all. You can find me on Twitter or Telegram using my Piotr PRZ handle. I'm working as software gardener and trainer sometimes. I post my stuff, my things how they work in Java and also in IT on my personal webpage, softwaregarden.dev. And as said by our moderator, I'm working in a company called Atomic Jar. I'm working mostly with Java. Sometimes it's also Scala. Sometimes it's Golang. I'm mostly backend developer. And see, even when I go on a holiday, Java is my backend as well. Rustam, would you like to introduce yourself?
I can try. My name is Rustam. I am living and working in Oslo, Norway. I've been to Devoxx Ukraine quite a few times now. Like Piotr said, I'm pretty much the same thing. I miss being there in person, but virtually that's the next best thing we can do. I work as a consultant in a company called Competence, and I'm also a Java champion and Google Developer Experts for Cloud. So I'll be helping Piotr today with discussions and all the other things. So feel free to chat with us in the chat.
Yes, precisely. I mean, the presentation is not for us to broadcast. The presentation is for you to get some knowledge and to clear some doubts. So it's for you to ask the questions so we can answer them. Okay. So also in the chat, please let us know who you are, like what's your primary language, and also what's the version of Java you're using. I've seen that slightly more than a half of us are using Java 11, and like 1/6 is already using Java 17. But I really hope there will be more people using Java 17, right? And before we actually start, a little warning, caveat auditoris, please be aware that everyone can make a mistake. We're just humans, so maybe don't trust ultimately talking heads on the internet. Okay, so what are the records? Records are a new standard feature which came into, let's say, production, was introduced as standard feature in Java 16, right? We had Java 17. Is there waiting for you, and this whole talk is about making it easier than reading the freaking documentation, right? So records are a new kind of type declaration, and record is a restricted form of class. I kind of think of records or introduce records as if they were, let's say, distant cousins of Java like enum, which we have in Java since Java 5. I mean, enums are objects and classes, right? I mean, the instances are objects and enums are classes, and so are the records, but both are restricted, and then these restrictions have different forms, different shapes, right? So I'd like to introduce you to these restrictions and limitations and capabilities as well today. And every record extends Java lang record, and I believe this quote comes from one of the Jebs, or maybe even Mr. Bryan Getz himself, that records are transparent carriers for immutable data. And we'll be coming back to this short description, transparent carriers for immutable data, because I think it's really nice when it comes to records. And how does a record look like? It's actually quite simple. Instead of using class keyword, we are now typing or using record. Then we have as for classes, just as for classes, we have a name of the record. And we also have a body, which always have to be there, even when empty, right? Just for the class. The thing that makes it a little bit different is so-called record header. And in this header, we have the components So they will be used by the compiler and by us later, right? I've prepared also some code for you. This is how it looks like, right? So using the record is not very difficult, see? And this is an example of a record. I've added some extra methods, but let's say we can get rid of them, at least for time being. And this is like how the record looks like. So it is a complex number with real and imaginary part, and this is the empty body. And if you wish to, if you have such a need or something, you can add more methods. You see, in this case, I've decided to override toString and like add, subtract, and multiply record. So I can use it in this form of a program. Let me just run it. I hope you can see the screen. I will make it bigger just in case. And as you can see, this is how it works, right? So once declared or defined, the records are I just instantiated and used pretty much as every other Java object. There's no difference here. And if you are about to have some technical talk or something like this, please be aware that unlike enum, record is not a restricted keyword, right? I mean, maybe it's not wise to name your object record, and maybe it's not also wise to call it enum, but enum won't compile, whereas record will. So it's strictly speaking not a keyword, but a restricted type indicator or something like this, right? Okay, so oops, sorry. Yeah, let me just go back. See, the links are interactive and working for you. Yeah, so what records have? Records always have a name. You saw the complex in previous example. They may have record components. I mean, this is not obligatory, but this is usually the case. And they are turned into private final fields. They have, based on these components, generated accessors, also canonical constructor. And what's also important, and I think it might be one of the biggest selling points of records, they are also equals, hashcode, and toString methods generated. Meaning, in this example of ours, strictly speaking, I don't need to add this toString method. See, when I run this code again, it will work as well. At least it should be if the debug codes are with us. It's just see that now I have the default toString implementation running. And if I want to change it from this default, I can simply override it to have this notation I was taught to use at the university, right? So I prefer this scientific notification, so to say. That's why I can override this toString, meaning it's generated, but I can easily override it if I really need to, right? And they always have a body, even if it's an empty one. What records can? They can redefine constructors or define custom constructors. They may have own implementation of generated methods, like you have just seen for this toString, but they should obey the invariants or the rules. Please be aware of that, right? And they might have extra methods, static fields and static methods. They can implement interfaces, and they can be generic. And we should also have code for that, right? So let's go briefly through the examples of technically valid usage of records, but I wouldn't say this code would pass my code review if I were to use it in like a real business code. So this code is for you to demonstrate technical capabilities, not to be used in production. So as you can see, records may have no fields or just one field or one component. They might also be generic, as you can see. So the first component is serializable, and the second is a number, right? So I can use this stuff, right? They may also have custom methods, although I would say, or I would argue that this method doesn't belong to the data. So it's not using the components. It shouldn't belong to this data and to this record at all. We might have static fields and static methods, because why not? We can also have something like a deeply mutable field, right? So the field, if I have like a string, for example, it's not mutable, of course, but when I have atomic integer, I can increment it and get the value, right? So when I call the bump method, it should be called in here, as you can see, 1, 2, 3. I can bump and get it, right? But again, this is not what I would recommend you to do. We can override this toString method, as you've seen, and we can also have custom equals in hash code, right? Because let's say due to whatever reason we need to make him custom. Although I would argue that if you need to have a custom equals and hash code, then maybe something's wrong with the way you're using the record. And we also can have custom accessors. I mean, the accessors should obey the contract. Therefore, I'm still returning the value of this component. Yet I am having here, as you can see, a custom side effect like logging, something like this, right? So the compiler will let us through with this. And then we can have a thing like a full canonical constructor, because let's say I have a record like this and I want this record to be created only when such invariants are met. So the first component is different than the second one, and the third one is different than the fourth one. Then I can override the constructor. I can toss these two assertions, then I can assign these fields, and this is only for us to see that this canonical constructor was called, right? And then, I mean, it's stated as a non-goal in this JEP for the records. It's a non-goal to be on wall with the boilerplate code. Yet, as you can see, just to add these 2 lines, I had to repeat this header, these 4 assignments, right? So it's still like quite verbose, quite ceremonial code. So instead of going for full constructor, we can go for a compact constructor. Then I don't have the list of the parameters. You see, this is unlike, I mean, it doesn't happen in any other place, as far as I can tell, for any other method or a constructor declaration in Java, right? But as you can see, I don't even have an empty list. I just don't have the list at all. And then I can just toss the asserts, and I don't have to reassign these fields. So when you just need to add some verification, some assertions, you're good to go when you just override the compact constructor, right? And as you can see, the result will be exactly the same. And of course, we can have custom non-canonical constructors, right? So we have this record in which we like to keep the length in the hash of the string, because let's say we don't trust that it's like cached in string itself. And then we'd like to have, for example, such a constructor. So we like wrap the default one in here. That's also possible, right? It's just maybe you can answer that in the chat why this this component cannot be called hash code, right? Why it's called hash, not hash code. And then, of course, as you can see, also, so we'd see that perhaps later as well, that these custom constructors may be less visible. So this record is like has the default access, right? Our default visibility, whereas this custom constructor has limited visibility. It's more, it's less visible because it's private, right? And of course, and I encourage you to do that. Records can implement interfaces. So if I want instances of this record to be comparable, I can easily do that, and then I implement this compare to method as any other method, right? And these accessors inside can use override or don't have to use override. It's up to you, whichever you prefer, because strictly speaking, we're not overriding a method which we created ourselves, but there is such a method, so it's up to you whether you prefer to override or not. Okay, what records can't do is they cannot extend classes or can be extended. They can't have anything like setters. They can't have any extra instance fields. Remember, they are transparent carriers, so they cannot have any hidden fields or hidden agendas or whatever we call it. Everything they take in the constructor, they also expose using their accessors, right? Therefore, they cannot have any extra super private fields, so to say. The canonical constructors cannot be less visible on the custom ones. They cannot declare native methods. They cannot assign components in compact constructors. So yeah, I'll show you that in a second. So if I were just to give you or summarize this slide, I would say records cannot do anything that would put the data kept in this transparent carrier at risk, at any danger, right? Or being malformed, misused, or something like this. So this is like TLDR for this slide. Again, let us see that in code. So here are the limitations. By the way, the code is for you available online, so you can check it out later and play on your own if you find the velocity we're going quite fast, but there's really a lot to say about records, and we don't have that much time, I'm afraid. So as I told you, I mean, extending Java to date wouldn't be a very smart idea anyway, right? For any kind of class, I would suggest you go for Java time. still records cannot extend anything, whether it's date or not, nor they can be extended. As you can see, this doesn't work as well. I cannot extend the record. Record is implicitly final. They cannot have any extra super hidden private fields or anything like that. Let me make that bigger. Nor they can have anything like setter-rich methods, reflecting the accessors, like we saw in the previous example, or they also can have native methods, right? And the constructors need to have the same visibility. See, so this is a constructor, which is a I'm not doing anything in this constructor, right? But it's a constructor, canonical constructor, and it cannot be less visible. See, it doesn't work. It has to be at least as visible as this record, right? Only the custom constructors, meaning which have signatures different than, or list of parameters different than the list of components, can have lesser visibility or more restrictive visibility. And records cannot reassign, or the compact constructors cannot reassign fields inside, right? And also that's quite important, and I quite like this restriction, which was introduced quite lately. I mean, not as one of the incubator or preview features, is that if I have the name of this component and the type of this component, they have to match exactly in full canonical constructors. So as you can see, to make this work, I need to go for foo bar, else it won't. So, oh, sorry. Let me do it like this, perhaps bar and foo bar. Right, so whoops, right, so this is working now, and it doesn't work if I make a typo or I just don't keep exactly the same name, right? And of course, records cannot be abstract because they cannot be extended. That's kind of obvious. And you can say that they are final, but it's not strictly needed because they are final implicitly anyway. So it's there is no need to do that. And records, that's really important, my friends. Records are not JavaBeans, right? So where records were about to be released as a first preview feature, I saw pretty much a lot of people getting excited on Twitter saying, "Yay, we're going to have records, no more JavaBeans." And the other people were asking, "So what are these records?" "Oh, these are just like JavaBeans, only without setters." No, that's not case. That's not the thing, right? So records are not JavaBeans. They are POJOs, plain old Java objects with accessors and without getters, right? So they don't have any of these prefixes, is, get, has been, was, or anything like that. And they don't have setters, so we can think of them as named tuples, right? So you might be wondering what a tuple is. So, for example, we have tuples in Scala where they're anonymous, and in Java we have named tuples. And I'm pretty confident you've been using tuples as well. In SQL, you only call them rows, right? And they sometimes require overriding equals in hash code. But I would say, if you have to do that, think really, really hard if you're not misusing records. I mean, it is sometimes required, but I would say these cases are quite limited. Okay. Okay. So maybe just to show you that we have example for that as well. So as you can see, we have this equals, right, and the other examples. So I may ask this as a riddle actually, because why not? So yeah, let's do this little riddle, and maybe someone will be answer to be able to answer that in our chat. So let's say I have a record like this. Okay, this is a record. It has an instant when it was created and the list of all locations, because record was the name of a sweet candy bar a few years ago in Poland, right? So the idea is I'm creating or fabricating these records, right, and then I'm keeping in the record all the locations like warehouses, when it's sent through, and so on. So I have this box for my records. I have my first sweet bar and a second sweet bar, right? And then I'm adding these two bars to my box. And then I send the bar one to warehouse alpha and the other bar to warehouse beta. And just to make sure, I just add them to this box again, because it's better to make sure that these bars in this box. And then the question is, how many records or the sweet bars we have in our box, right? So I'm really curious if you can tell us how many records will be in this box, or what box will report as its size, right? As an exercise for the participants. Okay, nesting records. I think nesting records is a very useful feature, if not the primary one, I would say. So nesting records works just like nesting static classes. We should also have example for that. Yes, as you can see, when I have a like inside class, I can also refer to fields in the enclosing class, right? But once I want to make this class static class, meaning nested class, this doesn't work, right? And also it doesn't work in records. So
Хорошо, можете
uh, as you can see, I hear voices. Sorry. Records behave like nested classes, right? There's nothing fancy here, and its local records are very handy for streams like reduce operations, intermediate results, or something like this. So I used to present you Ting collector when I was talking about Java 12, right? And we had this example, Devoxx 2019, I believe. So the whole idea is when I have a stream of longs, is to be able to compute the sum and the count of the numbers in just one run. Okay, so instead of this record, what I had at that time was this binish like class. Okay, so I had this you see two public final fields, right? This constructor for easiness and to string method to just visualize the results. Right, let's see if it works. Hopefully it does. Hopefully it does. Yeah, it does. So as you can see, the sum is still 190 and we have 20 elements in our stream. The thing is to use count and sum, for example, in Ting collector or in reduce method, as in here, right? I need to create this class. And this is like quite a few lines, I would say. And see, we don't have any getters and setters, so this is pretty much minimalistic, not to mention equals or hash code, right? The thing is, instead of this class now, I can simply create this record, right? And I have this record class, and then as you can see, this is the only line I have because I'm then given the constructor, the toString method, accessors, and also equals and hash code. So I don't need to do anything beside writing this single class, right? And as you can see, the results are still the same. And I think the most useful thing about this is, have you noticed where this record class is located? Maybe not. I mean, we are inside the main method, my friends. See? We are inside the main method. So when I declare a record inside a method, it will be visible since that point till the end of the scope, right? So it's possible. So I don't need to have another separate bean classes as like intermediate types or something like this. Now it's as easy as this, and as a byproduct, we also have see I'm in main method again. We now also have not only local records but also local enums, local interfaces, and local classes, right? So this is one of the changes of Java 16. Let me run this to make sure I'm not lying, because in code we trust. As you can see, this is really the case. So I can have local stuff inside methods now. So not just inside classes as nested classes or intended classes, but also as local classes, meaning inside methods. Okay, right. So yeah, these local declarations, these are a kind of byproduct, so we can use them locally in methods now, not only just records, right? And a little reflection of the records. So we have two new methods, and I would say if you need to run these methods as, let's say, a product developer or something like this, I would pretty much say the records are misused. However, that might be the case. I'm just not aware of this. I guess these are really, really important to various library maintainers, right? So sometimes they need to check if the thing you're passing them is a record. So if it's a record, you can find this out using this isRecord method, and then we can get the record components as an array, right? So we can call the accessors, for example, and so on. We have this example also here if you're really curious how it works. And this example will prove you that records are not JavaBeans because they don't have these get methods, for example. So they don't obey this well, it wasn't a specification, this, let's say, convention, right? Of having these getters and setters. I mean, they don't have setters by default. And when it comes to annotations, right, the annotations also get propagated whenever needed, and this is dictated by this element type sitting inside target, right? So when we have these annotations of various, you see, target types, I can then use them to annotate things on the record, right? When I have a record, I can annotate, use all of these you see to annotate our component, right? And then I really hope to show you that quickly. Yeah, as you can see, then they get propagated wherever they need it or wherever they make sense. So as you can see, when it comes to this private field, on the field annotation and fun annotation got propagated. Of course, not the parameter annotation or like record component annotation or method annotation, right? Method annotation got propagated to this component method, as you can see. So you may use annotations without any issues, and they work really, really smart. No questions or doubts or surprises here, I would say. Serialization of the records is a bit different, I would say, and it differs because when it comes to this Java native serialization, using the binary format and whatnot, it's done using constructor. I mean, the objects are reconstructed using constructor, not any fancy methods. That's important. And perhaps libraries and frameworks need to adapt because of that. Let me just show you another quick example, which is serialization. But instead of going for a serializable format, perhaps we should go for this. We're going to use what I mean. You see this object mapper, so I guess you know what's going to happen. It's JSON, right? Because these days we are perhaps using JSON even more often. So I plan to serialize and deserialize bean, right? A single bean, which is mimicking a record, meaning it doesn't have, as you can see, getter. It just has this accessor method, right? And when we try to, when we try to run this example, let me try to run it. It works, right? So we've been able to create this bean and we were able to deserialize it. Why was it possible? Because I had to toss these extra annotations, right? So I informed Jackson, so this field is JSON property, and that the constructor, for example, could be deconstructed like this. When I don't have these annotations, let's see what happens. Then things simply don't work. As you can see, Jackson is complaining that it cannot find any serializer or deserializer, so we could go like custom serializer, right? Or we can toss these annotations to make this work. Or for example, I could obey the contract and just add the getter, which is not the case for the records, right? Something like this. Let's see if it works. Right, so the Jackson should know how to serialize and deserialize this object when it's a bean. Yes, this is really the case. So how to make this work for record? Right now, I'm going to repeat and do the same stuff for record. And as you can see, it doesn't work. It's exactly the same message. So what we could do, we could go for this record and we could, again, toss these annotations, as you can see, right, and now it should work. Fingers crossed, fingers crossed. Yeah, it works. See, it works. So serializing and deserializing record isn't pretty much difficult, but as I told you, that maybe libraries need to adapt, and this is exactly what happened in case of Jackson. So let's go to my POM file. As you can see, I'm using, hopefully we'll be able to see that, I'm using pretty much outdated Jackson, right? So even IntelliJ is telling me, hey, this is like too old version. So let's use this 2.12, which is newer. I mean, still not the newest one, but newer, right? And let's see how things work now. So give it a spin, give it a spin. So as you can see, since version 2.12, and you should really check your dependencies, Jackson is able to handle records without any extra annotations, right? So we had this just for visibility. And as you can see, if you need to serialize and deserialize data to JSON using Jackson, this is actually all you need. We don't even need the serializable. I mean, this is for the other demo, right? So this is all we need to make this example work. Let me prove it to you once again. I mean, we won't see these messages, right? But as you can see, it works. So this is what I mean. I mean, records are now in Java, we have a standard way of handling data, of passing data. And when you need a transparent carrier for immutable data, record is exactly the thing. And some libraries like Jackson in this example already adjusted to that, right? And they just use this is record, and they kick with the proper logic, and we don't need anything special. The others still need to adapt, but as you can see, once we're there, passing data will be much easier, much less ceremony. And this is standard. I mean, this is Java language specification and so on, so no surprises. Also easier for library maintainers, for them to handle these things properly. Okay, records, my friends, don't have anything like copy. I mean, case classes in Java have this copy method, or with Lombok, we could use this withers, like, all right. But this is not a case when it comes to records. They don't have anything like this. So the idea is to basically recreate or call a constructor again, and then choose whatever is needed, or a proper div as one of the or parameters, right? Or two parameters, or how many you need. So there is no other mechanism but to call a constructor, right? And yeah, that's why it's important for this access source equals and hash code to obey contracts if you need to override them. And using records with other features is also possible, right? They already supported with pattern matching with instance of, and they work really nicely with sealed hierarchies because they're final classes, right? And in the future, they will support pattern matching with deconstruction. I mean, we have this pattern matching working for switch in Java 17 as a preview feature. It still doesn't have the deconstruction, but we should have this in one of the incoming Java versions. There is more on records on my blog page. If you're intrigued, I did even some sick games, right? I tried to add this with from Lombok to Java records. It worked in Java 15. It unfortunately doesn't work in Java 16 and onwards, like and other sick things with records. Or I try to debunk some misconceptions when it comes to records. So please go to my page if you're really interested about that. And let me just show you one more thing. I hope we have enough time for this. Sorry, I need to open another project, which is records lib demo as a new window. Right. And sometimes people ask us if records can be used as entities. Right. So as you can see, I have this entity being like for a JPA, as you can see, and it works, right? So this is like the minimum example, I would say. It doesn't work, however, for a record, because there are reasons. For example, what's the warning here? Entity records should have public no R constructor, and it's not going to happen because we need to because these fields are public final, we need to feed them in the constructor. That's why we cannot provide this constructor, and so on and so on. That's why it's impossible to use Java records as entities in a JPA or in Hibernate, if you will. However, it's possible, as you can see, to use them sometimes with other ORMs. So here I'm using entity as a record using Morphia. See, so it is possible. Let me see. Let me run a test in background. Hopefully it will work. Right, using like a real database and stuff. And also, as you can see, we can use what I'm sure you recognize this pattern, right? So this is like an endpoint in Spring, right? And I have a request and I want to respond various stuff, right? So as you can see, as a request, I mean, what was the last time when you mutated a request? I doubt you had to do that, right? So as you can see, a request can also be a record now, right? And if you just create your response in one shot, you can also create your response as a record. It will work as well. No problems with that. It goes even more. For example, you can use records now in Spring Batch applications as well. Instead of having like name and email, here we could go for sorry public final, right? I'm just converting this bean to a record. That's what I'm doing. Okay, and we should now have add constructor parameters. Let's have a constructor for everything. And as you can see, I have this hint now convert to a record. So I converted this to a record. And for this to make to work, I need to go for a target type, field set mapper, right? And go for a, what was that? That was a record. That was a record. Yeah, record field set mapper, and I'm just going to say name and email class, and instead of instead of this, and now new, of course. And now as you can see, this batch job would be operating using records. So as you can see, we don't even need for such ancient things like Java batch. And to have this working, there's one thing you need to do. You have to go for Spring Boot at least 2.5.0 or newer versions, like we've seen 2.7.0, I believe, or last few days. And let me go back just as latest example for this Morphia. So I was using real database, right? As you can see, I'm using test containers, and I have this MongoDB container, meaning it was a real container running in using my Docker in this very case, right? And I was just able to create this test because I gave a real database a spin, and I asserted this. So as you can see, we've created these entities both as bean and both as record, right? And the test has passed, meaning from the database I was able to fetch them from the database, even using like a proper command, executing proper command in this container. So I'm not using even ORM to check if it's really there. Things are really there. So it's the answer. If you have question, can I use records for entities in my ORM? It depends on your ORM. That's basically the answer. I think this is it when it comes to this extremely fast presentation on Java records. I think we have time to answer some questions, should there be any. Back to the studio, back to Rustam. Hello, is there anybody out there?
Can you please bring me back to the screen?
Yes.
Hello.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hello.
So yeah, thank you guys for your presentation. You can see questions in the Rocket platform if you are online in the Rocket now. If not, you can just go to the Rocket and join the Q&A session after the talk with participants. And then participants can ask you their questions live, like with audio or video, and you can have a live discussion with them.
Okay, so do we have any questions or not? Because sorry, I was presenting and I wasn't able to.
Yes, that's we have a few questions. We have at least one comment and a couple of questions. So I guess I'll take the comment first, and that was about immutability of records. So Sergio writes that I don't fully enjoy that fields and record are final by default, and there is no way around it. It sounds like a showstopper, at least for several cases where records could be useful. Do you foresee any developments to get some native solutions for that in Java?
I don't see any. As far as I know, there are no plans to do that. I mean, if you have to use mutable things, you still should be using JavaBeans. Actually, I kind of enjoy the fact that records are immutable, because we have to think what actually mutability is. I mean, if you take it from another perspective, mutability is just an optimization on on memory, basically, so we don't have to copy the stuff, right? But it makes a great deal of things more difficult, because when things are moving and not frozen, for example, you have to make deep copies, save copies, and so on. So for me personally, I cannot enjoy that records are actually they have immutable fields, because then it's way easier to pass this data around.
Thanks. That's yeah. I agree. I think it's actually a good thing. But yeah. So another question is about the local records. How are they implemented, and if there are any? Is it similar to anonymous classes, or they're different?
That's a very good question, but I don't think we should be answering this question now. I mean, I understand the curiosity, but I guess not the way we should be thinking about records. I mean, if they are implemented this way or another way, like for example, there was also this misconception about lambdas being implemented as anonymous classes. Sorry, but it doesn't actually change much, right? I mean, we should be using them in proper way, and that's it. And yeah, there is like syntactic sugar. Actually, when you think about it this way or another, also for other features like pattern matching, for example. But should it really stop? Should it really stop us from using it? I don't think so.
Yep. Then there was another question that I added myself, is that probably we should
Great.
mention some. You've mentioned quite a few ways to use it and how you should use it and all the other things, but we should mention also when you should not use it. I mean, is there any use cases where it's a bad idea to use records?
Yes, I would say there is definitely one scenario when we shouldn't be using records, and it's actually related to the first question we had, right? So when you need things to be mutable, I mean, we've ruled out that actually in our use case we need things to be mutable, because it's like it's not. I'm not trying to say that immutable is always better than mutability. It's just it depends on the scenario, it depends on your needs, right? I'm only suggesting that try or consider going with immutable stuff first. So when you need mutable stuff, please don't sneak into records like arrays or mutable collections or anything like this. So we have this record, but inside you have mutable data, right, to sneak around. So that's not how it should be working, I think. So for such a scenario, don't use records, just go with JavaBeans.
Thank you very much. That's yet another good answer. I don't see any other questions so far, but I guess
Okay,
we can continue the talking on the
on
interwebs,
chat.
and we can answer chat in the chat and or in on Twitter.
Yes,
Yeah.
I have two more slides to show. Can I get my screen back?
Okay. Yeah.
Remote presentations. So I would like to thank you for joining us for this presentation, but I also like to encourage you to give always your feedback, not just for Rustam and myself, but for other speakers, for other events, and so on. It really helps us speakers and organizers to know what you think, what you need, and so on, so on. Unfortunately, paper forms won't work this way, so let us know in the chat. Right? And there is this Java record for the intrigued. Большое спасибо from us. Duże дякую. Yes, and these. Sorry, I messed up. This is like the wrong presentation. Sorry. Uh, I terribly
Should we
messed
get back
up.
your slides?
Sorry, that would be in a second. Devoxx Ukraine HTML, because I really wanted to show you the QR link. See, yeah, this is the presentation for you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
дуже
we
дякую.
are getting back your slides. Just a moment. Yeah. We'll.
Yeah, so дуже дякую, and this is the link for you for the slides and for the code examples. If you need them, I guess we'll also post it to chat if you if you'd like to play with records more, because I understand we didn't have enough time. I mean, previously we did that with Rustam. It took us like 1 hour and 20 minutes or something like this. So as you can see, we really rushed today.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. Дуже дякую for supporting Devoxx Ukraine this year. And yeah, I encourage you to join the Q&A rooms. You can join Rocket and find discussion in the menu, and then find the discussion of your talk. So dear participants, if you have more questions, you can join the Q&A rooms and ask them. So thank you once again. I really, really hope we can meet in 2022 in person. Yeah, at some point this quarantine should be ended. So
I really hope so too.
yeah.
Yes.
So thank you for supporting our event this year. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you for having me.
Stay safe. Thank you.